Okay, kinesiology 230, chapter 15. This is presentation number 7. I mentioned in the previous presentation, this is kind of like an aside conversation, talking about program design and general progressions. And let me get myself here. There we go. So if we kind of break this out, it just logically, if you look at like what we've been talking about so far, you have exercise selection. It's what exercises are performed. You have frequency, how often the person is working out. There can also be how often a muscle group is being worked, the exercise order, how the workout progresses. We talked about this in terms of prioritizing. In one example, we talked about prioritizing perhaps what the client goals are first, and then you have everything ancillary to that afterwards. If you're training for athletics, it's going to be generalized warm up, specific warm up, explosive training, and then you get into large multi-joint exercises first, then you go into single joint exercises thereafter. You can even have specificity of training where you have specific exercises on the front end of the workout. Load, that's how much weight or what percentage, they're kind of synonymous. The volume is a number of repetitions completed for a particular workout or a particular muscle group. The variation, and that can be reps, sets, loads, so exercise selection, the order of exercises or other variables that you so choose to introduce in. And progression is the planning of rep and set and load parameters towards a training goal. And usually it's just seen as like general to specific, simple to complex, GS, SC. And exercise selection is or are a part of this. So if we look at like just a total body workout, we have a general warm-up here to the left, a specific warm-up, large multi-joints, small single joint, core work, flexibility, core work with tugging abs here, flexibility cool down, 10 minutes on elliptical, general warm-up. 2x20 freestanding squats. Then we got 2x20 push-ups. And then we got small single joint, choose one exercise from each of the main muscle groups. And by this, we've done freestanding squats. We've done push-ups with our own body weight. So we're not even holding a bar or a barbell in our hands. And then you can do, say, like a smorgasbord type exercise where you have one exercise from arm, back, chest, core, meaning abs, legs, and shoulders. This would be a total body fitness kind of day. You get one exercise from each, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 exercises. You do some flexibility work at the end, and then you do maybe like a walking cool down. So you can kind of see how those translate over from one category to the next. When we look at the arms, back, chest, core, legs, etc., well, this could be something as simple as dumbbell bicep curls, dumbbell one arm row, dumbbell chest press, crunches, alternate leg crunches, shoulder press. You have arms, back, chest, core, leg, shoulder exercises. That's where the ABCCLS comes from. It's just verbiage I use to help people kind of wrap themselves around a real simple concept when we're doing total body fitness type workouts. So with exercise selection, exercise selection, we still keep the same exercises we saw before, right? We look at the rep schemes that we had before. We're not going to change the rep schemes. So we have bicep curls, dumbbell one arm row, chest press, crunches, leg lunges, and shoulder press. That's what we saw on the last slide. If we do alternative exercises, say perhaps we do this on a Monday, we come back on Wednesday and do this, well, our alternative exercise would be straight bar curls. Instead of dumbbell one arm row, we do lat pull down narrow. Chest press, we do barbell chest press. Over here, crunches, we do side planks. Leg lunges, we go leg press. And then dumbbell shoulder press to a dual action pulley seated shoulder press. So you can see that there's a variation within the context of exercise selection here when we're using alternative exercises. And it really comes down to this, like you can have one on one day, one on the next day, and perhaps even a third day if you're guiding your client or working with your client on a Friday. So let's look at this in terms of exercise order, right? So it's not a brain bender. You're not seeing things there. If we look at frequency and we now switch this into exercise order, what we've just done is we rearranged the actual exercises. So instead of doing the arms, back, chest, core, legs, shoulders, well, here's a shoulder press. That's your S's first. Then it becomes legs, core, chest, back, arms. We've just flipped the order. We've reversed the order. But the exercise order is an area of opportunity for trainers to be able to mix things up. It doesn't always have to be chest as the first thing you do, but I've seen trainers do that with every single one of their clients every single day for 6 hours a day. And like, I'd be bored as a trainer if I did that, let alone my clients be bored. So if we look at the loading, pertains to the percentage workload. We've seen percentages can be dependent upon a number of different things, including the repetition. So if we were in 3 sets of 15, we're at 55% all the way down the list here on a Monday. And excuse me, all the way down on a Monday. And perhaps you come back on a Wednesday with your client if you're in a periodization schedule and you're going to do something a little different. You can change the exercises, keep the same rep and set schemes at the same percentages, or you can have a heavy day or a volume day on Monday like we have here, sets of 15, and then maybe on Wednesday you come back and you have a heavier load day and a lower repetition day where you're doing sets of perhaps 8 instead of sets of 15. Completely within the realm of what you can do with your clients, 100%. So with progression, there's 2 things we're talking about. We have download weeks, which is a little bit out of the context of what we're talking about here. And then we have total volume load in the bottom row. And I got my face in the way here, which really doesn't help you guys, but bottom row. So if we go ahead and take a look at this, in week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 12, we got 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, 4, 8, 2 by 8, 2 by 6, 3 by 6, 4 by 6, 2 by 6, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What you see here is this, your total volume. We can calculate out 3 by 10, 30, 4 by 10, 40. You can do the math for the rest of these. Notice what happens. The volume is ever decreasing. And even here, we have these pretty sizable drop-offs because we're going from 4 sets down to 3 sets. And over here, we're going from 4 sets down to 3 sets. And we're even going from 5 reps and 8 reps down to 6 here and down to 4 here. Those download weeks are built in specifically to allow people to recover. And so with this, if we do like an average load, this would be like the load range that we would use, 78 to 82, for example, for sets of 6. So on average, you're going to be at about 80%. When we get into like our sets of 4, you're going to be about 87.5% over your 4 sets, give or take. So if we do the math on that, we have 3 sets of 10, which gives us 30 repetitions at 70%. Our total percentage tonnage or total percentage load, and you'll see this kind of written both ways, but let's just go total percent load on this, becomes a relative concept because it's based off of 70%, not 100 pounds. But 100 pounds could be 70% of somebody's 1 rep max. So it ends up being a conversation of simple math. The point I want to get across here is when you look at this, the total percentage, if you will, 70% by 30, 67.5 by 40. So even though we're lowering the average load here just a little bit, we still have a higher total volume load on a percent basis because the overall reps are higher. When we get down here, we have a higher percent on average, but the total reps are 22, but we know we're in a rep range that's going to be more strength oriented, right? We've kind of transitioned from hypertrophy to base strength to strength and then power, and then we get into kind of more power peaking if we were going to weeks number 13, 14, 15. But this is just a simplified version of how you have, as volume decreases, the intensity increases over time, but also the total percent, if you will, total percent or total volume load percent will manipulate or will move that, but that'll in general kind of move on a downhill slope as we go through our programming. And these in the blue are download weeks, and you can see that represented both in the average percent of the load, but also the total volume load that's moved on a percent basis for the week. Kind of a brain bender. There's a lot there, but when you get into programming, that's kind of like some foundational stuff for you. We look at this progression. This is progression to power clean exercise. So if we look at this and we go toes, hips, traps, we're driving the toes on the ground, we're fully extending the ankle, we got full knee extension, hip extension, and the last thing we do is we have a hard shrug towards the top. And that toes, hips, traps sets the foundation for good hip engagement and teaching your athletes to be explosive, but also it's the timing. It's like throwing a pebble in a pond where the waves kind of radiate out. When a person does a power clean, you have toes, hips, traps, that contraction. I mean, it's all universal. It all happens as one unit. But in slow kinematic analysis, it happens almost like toes, hips, traps. It's wild to see. So then we go hand cleans from a kneeling position. So we take away part of the musculature here for just a progression. Snapping the hips, working on good scoop and catch position, and then we go clean from a block. Maybe. And what would happen hereafter is you would end up having perhaps running side by side with this would be power clean first pull from the floor. Perhaps you're doing Russian deadlift, which is the second part of the power clean itself. It's the knees to the hips movement pattern where you're hinging to hip hinge is what it is. And then after you do power clean from the blocks, you would then introduce in the actual full power clean movement pattern itself. So notice how in a whole part whole methodology, we're teaching different components of the power clean with the idea that we're trying to progress towards the actual full movement pattern. So what happens is when your athlete does a power clean, they already know how to do it. They've learned the different subcomponents, and all you're doing is asking them to connect the dots from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to be able to do a full power clean. Get out of here, here, and here. So my point to you is this: you work with different people, you work with your athletes, and you work with the general population. You may have to take time to teach them these different progressions, and the progressions themselves become very much nebulous and interconnected, where it's not just like linear. We're doing 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, 3 sets of 8, 4 sets of 8. You might perhaps be doing a higher load, higher repetition range for a particular exercise, but you're supporting a movement pattern to be able to teach something that you want to actually have completed in a lower repetition range. So you might be doing first pull from the floor for a deadlift with the understanding that you're doing sets of 10 in a hypertrophy type of program design, but you're never going to do sets of 10 on a power clean, even though that exercise lends itself to power clean. So just realize that whole part whole has its place. And then when we get into, let me get back to this, when we get into program design, it's either a combination of manipulating the variables, manipulating that include load, includes repetitions, which is volume, total volume load, or even a course of a 12-week program, how you manipulate the rep and set schemes to have the inverse relationship between intensity going up and volume going down over time. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off and move to the next one.